The Macchi MC200 Saetta, or Lightning, was a fighter aircraft developed by Aeronautica Macchi, AerMacchi, of Italy around the mid-1930s, resulting in one of the most produced and used aircraft of the Regia Aeronautica, or Italian Royal Air Force, during the Second World War. It yielded good results on all fronts where the Italian forces operated, from the hot and dusty deserts of North Africa to the cold, snowy Russian steppes. Hello, and welcome to another Plane Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Butane, and today we'll look at what is perhaps the most notable Italian fighter of the Second World War. After the 8th of September 1943, both the Luftwaffe and the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, the Italian National Air Force on the Axis side, and the Aeronautica Co-Belligerante Italiana, the Italian Co-Belligerent Air Force on the Allied side, used the Saetta. After the war, the Aeronautica Militare, Italian Military Air Force, also used the few Macchi 200s that were still functioning for another 2 years, until 1947. Development. Before the Macchi 200, the Regia Aeronautica was equipped with fighter biplanes, such as the FIAT CR-30 and CR-32, considered amongst the best biplanes produced in Europe at the time. On the 10th of February 1936, Direzione Generale Considerazioni Aeronautiche, or DGCA, General Directorate of Aeronautical Construction, requested the development of a low-wing monoplane ground interceptor fighter with retractable landing gear. The maximum speed was to be 500 km per hour or 310 miles per hour, with a range of 2 hours and a climb rate of 6,000 meters, 19,685 feet, in 5 minutes. The requested armament was to be composed of 1 or 2 12.7mm machine guns, and the engine had to be the FIAT A74 radio with an entirely metal fuselage. The Macchi MC200 was designed by a team of engineers led by Mario Castoldi, a successful designer who had already worked on the Macchi M39 and MC72, the latter of which is still holding the speed record for a seaplane powered by a non-standard engine. The initials MC stood for Macchi Castoldi to emphasize the prestige that the company gave to its chief engineer. Technical characteristics. Structure. The structure of the MC200 was entirely metal, which at the time was a big step forward for the Italian aircraft. New fuselage turned out to be quite robust, but was heavier and led to longer production times. It was made of molded duralumin and was covered with super aviano plates, a special duralumin alloy riveted with countersunk head rivets, reducing aerodynamic drag. Like the fuselage, the wings, mounted on the lower part of the fuselage, were also a single structure consisting of 2 spars with ailerons and ventral flaps. The whole wing structure was made of duralumin, apart from the ailerons, which retained the old style, doped and painted canvas structure. The semi-enclosed cockpit was introduced in August 1941, starting from the 12th aircraft of the 5th production series of Macchi, and starting from the 65th aircraft of the 1st production series of Breda. Engine. The MC200 engine was the radio 2-row Fiat Aeronautica 74 RC38 Cyclone. It had 14 cylinders and was air-cooled, with a displacement of 31.25 liters or 1,907 cubic inches. Engine delivered a takeoff power of 870 horsepower at 2,500 RPM. This engine guaranteed a maximum speed of 503 km per hour at 4,500 meters or 14,763 feet. Its low fuel consumption also guaranteed a range of 570 kilometers or 354 miles, with 2 fuel tanks, one in the wings and the other under the cockpit, as well as a third auxiliary tank that could be placed behind the pilot's seat. Armament. The armament consisted of two 12.7mm Breda Saetta machine guns positioned on the engine cowling and synchronized with the propeller. They were fed with two 370-round 12.7 by 81mm SR Breda belts. On the Macchi MC 200CB variant, or the Cazia Bombardiere fighter bomber variant, the aircraft was equipped with two underwing pylons, capable of carrying bombs weighing up to 160 kilograms each. Operational history. Regia Aeronautica. In Italy. The first MC200s were ready in the spring of 1939 and were delivered to the Regia Aeronautica during the same year. As of the 1st of September 1939, 29 Macchi MC200s had been delivered, of which 25 were allocated to frontline units, the others given to flight training schools. In comparison, the Regia Aeronautica had 19 FIAT G50s and 143 FIAT CR42s. At the time of the Kingdom of Italy's entry into the war on the 10th of June 1940, the number of MC200s in the Regia Aeronautica was 156. Of these, only 103 were in the frontline units and not all were combat ready. Similarly, there was an increase in other fighters on hand, with 118 FIAT G50s and 300 FIAT 42s. The very first Macchi aircraft were delivered to the 91st Squadron of the 10th Group of the 4th Storm, which was considered an elite unit. The 4th Wing received the MC200 shortly before entering the war, but preferred to go to battle in Libya with the old FIAT CR42 biplanes in late June 1940. During this mission, the Saettas proved effective and without any particular defects in dogfighting against the Hawker Hurricane. They were able to outclass the old Gloucester Gladiator biplanes without much difficulty. As of the 8th of September 1943, 33 Macchi MC200s were in the ranks of the Regia Aeronautica. Until September 1943, the Saetta was the most widely used Italian fighter on all fronts. The first examples of its successor, the Macchi MC202, entered frontline service in late September 1941, with the first examples of the Macchi MC205V appearing in February 1943. Greece. For air combat during the Greek campaign, which started on October 28, 1940, the 54th Wing was employed. Its 372nd Squadron had 12 Macchi MC200s, based at the Brindisi Casale Airport in southern Italy. Between November and December, the 373rd Squadron, with 11 MC200s, also arrived at the Bari Palese Airport, the 374th Squadron with 12 MC200s at the Taranto Grottaglie Airport, and the 370th with 8 MC200s at Foggia Airport, all in southern Italy. Yugoslavia. At the outbreak of hostilities against Yugoslavia, the only air units assigned to the sector were the 4th Wing, equipped with 96 Macchi MC200, the 7th Group in Treviso, and the 16th Group in Ravenna, which had 22 each, the 9th Group in Gorizia, and the 10th Group in Altura di Pola, which had 23 each, and finally, the 256th Squadron in Bari had 6 in service. At dawn on April 6, 1941, before the declaration of war, 4 MC200s of the 73rd Squadron took off without an exact mission, flew over the port of Pula, and then arrived at the island of Cres, attacking a tanker and setting it on fire. There were no noteworthy actions for the rest of the brief Yugoslav campaign. The Macchi of the 4th Wing flew against Yugoslavia for the last time on April 14th, when 20 Saetta of the 10th Group patrolled the airspace 100 kilometers south of Karlovac, but without encountering enemy aircraft. North Africa. The North African desert was the most important theater of operations for the Italian pilots and their Macchi 200 Saetta. At the end of the operations in Yugoslavia, the 153rd Group returned to Italy. It was based at Grottaglie Airport in southern Italy, with the task of defending the port of Taranto from RAF attacks. the first 11 MC200s of 374th Squadron under Captain Andrea Favini, who was later to become Wing Chief, arrived on April 19, 1941 at Castel Benito Airfield, 35 kilometers south of Tripoli. Until the end of June 9th, the Macchi aircraft remained under Favini's command. During this period of activity, the squadron never reached more than 7 operable Macchi at the same time. An interesting fact is that Captain Andrea Favini was still using a pre-production Macchi MC200 with a Fiat Hamilton 34D1 spinner and propellers. This is very strange, as all the pre-production aircraft in the very first production series should have been modified by that time. Given the continuation of operations, on July 2, 1941, Macchi MC200 of the 372nd Squadron of the famous 153rd Gruppo Asso dei Bastoni, or Ace of Wands, arrived in North Africa. Later, the 373rd Squadron from Greece, together with the 157th Group, also arrived. The 76th Squadron of the 7th Group Autonomo Cazia Terrestre, commanded by Major Marcello Fossetta, also arrived with 22 Macchi M200s. However, they lost almost all their fighters during a British air attack on the Benina base 19 kilometers east of Benghazi, where the unit was stationed. On December 8, 1941, a Macchi MC200 of 153rd Group clashed with Hawker Hurricanes of the British 974th Squadron. During the sortie, a Macchi engaged a Hurricane. After a series of very tight turns, the Macchi struck the Hawker's cockpit, which then flipped over and plummeted into a dive, killing New Zealand RAF Flight Lieutenant Owen Vincent Tracy, who has 6 kills credited to his name. The 153rd Group, in its July-December report, claimed to have flown 359 missions for a total of 4,686 flight hours by its pilots, and 19 enemy aircraft destroyed in flight, plus 12 probable, in addition to 35 aircraft destroyed on the ground. In December 1941, the Macchi MC200 began to be accompanied by Macchi MC202s of the 8th and 150th Groups based at El Nofilia Airport. On July 20th, 1942, the 18th Group of the 3rd Wing arrived at Tripoli, with the 83rd, 85th, and 95th Squadrons, a total of about 40 MC200s, of which 21 were the MC200CB configuration. These new arrivals, which were positioned in the Abu Agag Air Base, 370 kilometers from Cairo, meaning that the MC200 were still the most numerous Italian fighters in North Africa, with 76 units, of which about 3/4 were operational, and of which 37 were in the 2nd Wing. The Macchi MC200CB of the 18th Group carried out dozens of ground attack missions. One of the most famous was stopping the British attempt to recapture Tobruk by sea on July 1942, sinking the destroyer Zulu and seriously damaging 2 troop carrier ships. On April 18, 1942, between 1725 hours and 1830 hours, 5 Macchi MC200CBs attacked a column of tanks of the 1st Armored Division of the British 8th Army at Sidi Bou Ali, in the Governorate of Susa in Tunisia. 22 MC202s of the 54th Wing escorting the Saetta clashed with a formation of P-40s and Spitfires that had arrived to support the armored units. Captain Sergio Maurer, Lieutenant Giuseppe Roberto, and Sergeant Mari each shot down a Spitfire, while Sergeant Rodos brought down a P-40. Despite the Regia Aeronautica's gradual transition to the Macchi 202, the Saetta remained the most widely used fighter aircraft. It was widely used as a secondary fighter by pilots when their M202s were undergoing repairs. The 364th Squadron of the 150th Fighter Group, 52nd Wing, equipped with a Macchi MC200 Saetta, operating from the airports of El Agheila, Benghazi, and Martuba, participated intensively in intercept operations, surveillance flights, strafing ground targets, and escorting bombers. The Macchi MC200s were also able to successfully deal with Allied 4-engine aircraft despite their armament. On 14th August, Lieutenant Valari of the 2nd Wing intercepted 4 consolidated B-24 Liberators during a reconnaissance mission in the skies above Tobruk. Instead of waiting for support from other fighters, he attacked them alone, managing to shoot down one of them. A few days later, on the 23rd of August 1942, 3 MC-200s intercepted and attacked a group of B-24 Liberators en route to Tobruk. Sergeant Zanarini and 2nd Lieutenant Zaccarini shot down one Liberator while the 3rd pilot damaged another. The entirety of the 2nd Wing was 198 aircraft in August 1942, including Macchi 200s and 202s, which flew an unspecified number of missions that lasted a total of 394 hours over Tobruk and 1,482 hours escorting 77 Axis convoys from southern Italy to the North African coast. Allied air superiority was becoming more and more overwhelming. Unfortunately, precise data for the actions of the following months is not available. In October, 10 Macchi 200s were lost by the 2nd Wing. In the Soviet Union, a contingent of Macchi M.C. 200s were sent to flight in the front in the Soviet Union, despite the fact that they had an open cockpit. The Comando Aviazione del Corpo di Spedizione Italiano in Russia, aviation command of the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia, was officially constituted on July 29, 1941 at the Tudora Airport. Major Giovanni Borzoni's group landed at his airport on 12th August with the 359th Squadron of Captain Vittorio Minguzzi's group, which had 11 other pilots, including Captain Carlo Miliani and Lieutenant Giovanni Bonet. The 362nd Squadron of the Captain Germano Laferla also arrived with 11 other pilots. The 369th Squadron, commanded by Captain Giorgio Giannitelli, which had 13 pilots, and finally the 371st Squadron of Captain Enrico Mele, which had 11 pilots, completed the setup, all belonging to the 22nd Autonomous Land Fighter Group. On August 16th, the 61st Aerial Observation Group arrived with 32 Caproni CA-311s, 34th, 119th, and 128th Squadrons, and a Savoia Marchetti SM-82 for support. The 22nd Autonomous Land Fighter Group had a total of 51 MC-200s, 2 Savoia Marchetti SM-81s, and 3 Caproni CA-133s. It was sent to the Eastern Front from the Tirana airport, where they were located after March 1941. For its first missions, starting from August 27, 1941, it was stationed at the Krivoy Rog airport. On the same day, some aircraft of the 22nd Autonomous Group and some others of the 6th Group assigned to the 1st Ground Fighter Wing arrived in the Soviet Union. In total, 8 Soviet aircraft, 2 Polikarpov I-16s and 6 Tupolev SB-2s were shot down. Between August and early December, the 22nd Autonomous Fighter Group shot down another 8 fighters and bombers, apparently without suffering any losses. 4 more Soviets were down in December. On December 29, 1941, the 369th Squadron lost its commander, Captain Giorgio Giannicelli. During a solo reconnaissance mission, he was intercepted by more than 10 I-16 and Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-3 fighters, and after a grueling battle, he was shot down. For his bravery, he was posthumously awarded the Gold Medal. The Italian Machis in the Soviet Union were unable to carry out any missions throughout January and the first few days of February 1942 due to bad weather. On February 4th and 5th, the Regia Aeronautica launched an operation to destroy Soviet air bases. The first was at Krasny Liman, where the MC-200 destroyed 21 Soviet aircraft on the ground and another 5 fighters were shot down during dogfights over the airport. On May 4th, 1942, the 22nd Autonomous Land Fighter Group, which still had a few operational aircraft, were replaced by the 21st Autonomous Land Fighter Group, consisting of the 356th, 382nd, 361st, and 386th Squadrons. The 21st Group, commanded by Major Ettore Foschini, brought with it 12 new Macchi MC-202 fighters and 18 new Macchi 200s, most likely the fighter bomber version. During the Second Battle of Kharkov, fought between May 12th and 30th, 1942, Italian pilots carried out escort missions for German scouts and bombers. They earned the admiration of the commander of the German 17th Army, in particular for their daring and effective attacks in the Slavyansk area on Soviet fighters trying to shoot down German bombers. In the summer of 1942, following the German advance, the 21st Group moved first to Makeyevka airfield, and later to those of Tazinskaya, Voroshilovgrad, and Oblivskaya. The group managed to down 5 enemy aircraft in May, 5 in June, and 11 in July. Increasingly, Italian aircraft were asked to escort German planes. However, the Macchi aircraft wore out very quickly because of the lack of spare parts. On July 25th and 26th, 5 Macchi 200s were shot down during aerial combat with the Soviets. In the summer, 17 Macchi 202 Folgores arrived in Italy to reinforce the lineup of the Saetta, by then worn out by incessant use. At the beginning of December, the Macchi 200s still on the front lines numbered 32, plus 11 Macchi 202s. The losses suffered became more and more consistent due to the technological advancement of Soviet aircraft. On the 6th of August 1942, some MC-200 CBs carried out a bombing mission east of the Don, hitting Soviet artillery and infantry with their 50-kilogram bombs. In December, only 32 Macchi 200s and 11 Macchi 202s were available. The Soviet Air Force, which was starting to become better combat trained, as well as the increasing prevalence of anti-aircraft fire, also caused additional losses for the Macchi. In fact, over half of the missions that the Macchi were requested to carry out were ground attacks against Soviet tanks and infantry. 30 Macchi MC-200s and 9 MC-202s returned to Italy, while 15 damaged aircraft were dismantled and used for spare parts, abandoning them at airfields during the retreat. A total of 66 fighter planes have been lost on the Eastern Front for various reasons, but they managed to shoot down 88 enemy aircraft during their 17 months of operation in the area. In a post-war document written in Italy, it is stated that in 17 months, the fighters of the Regia Aeronautica on the Eastern Front carried out 3,059 actions against the Soviets, 511 in support of the infantry by dropping bombs, 1,310 machine gun attacks on ground targets, 1,938 escorts for bombers or scouts. 88 enemy planes were destroyed at the expense of the loss of 15 Macchi M200s in combat. The best Italian unit in the Soviet Union was Captain Germano Laferla's 362nd Squadron, which destroyed 13 aircraft on the ground and shot down 30 fighters and bombers in air engagements. The Luftwaffe. After the armistice of September 8, 1943, the German army managed to recover a small number of Macchi MC-200s from Italian airports and put them in service with the Luftwaffe, mostly as training aircraft. As far as it is known, these never took part in actions against Allied targets. The Republican National Air Force. After the armistice of 1943, of the 33 Macchi 200s operational at the time, 10 remained in the German-occupied territories. Not much is known about these 10 units, but it can be assumed that almost all of them were confiscated by the Luftwaffe. Several MC-200s remained in service with the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, National Republican Air Force, for training purposes. Some of these vehicles had probably been recovered from depots or hangars and returned to service after an overhaul period. The Italian Co-Belligerent Air Force. As many as 23 Macchi MC-200s managed to reach southern Italy after the armistice of September 8, 1943. Almost all of these belonged to the 8th Group, which had escorted the Regia Marina, or Italian Royal Navy, from La Spezia to Malta. In the summer of 1944, the 23 Macchi were assigned to the fighter school of Leverano, where they were used for training until they could no longer be maintained. Aeronautica Militare. Unfortunately, not much is known about the Macchi MC200s in service with the Aeronautica Militare, or Italian Air Force, after the war. A number of these, probably the surviving aircraft from the 23 Saettas used by the Aeronautica Coballegiante Italiana, were kept in service using spare parts found all over the Italian peninsula, some with new parts that were produced after the war. They were used for training until 1947. Being obsolete by the war's end, these MC200s were used in the 7th Squadron of the Fighter School of Lecce for the training of a new generation of Italian fighter pilots. Others. The MM337 prototype was presented at the Yugoslavian Belgrade Air Show in June 1938 and immediately attracted worldwide interest. Spain, Finland, Sweden, and Romania asked to evaluate the aircraft, but due to political problems and the Italian government's ban on exports, these negotiations could not move forward. Only the request of the Royal Danish Navy for 12 Macchi MC200s to replace their old Hawker Nimrods was accepted. However, when Germany invaded Denmark in 1940, the delivery was cancelled and the aircraft remained in Italy. Switzerland also requested 36 examples. Italy responded by offering the first batch of 24 and a second of 12. All examples would have been without radios and would have cost 58,000 USD, equivalent to $1.1 million today, each without ammunition. Due to the imminent entry into the war, the General Staff of the Royal Army blocked the negotiations before Switzerland allocated the funds. Production. In total, 1,153 examples of the Macchi MC200 Saetta were produced between May 1939 and October 1942. This included 2 prototypes in 12 different production series. It is difficult to classify the production of MC200s based on series because the plane was produced by 3 different companies. Different series have to be defined per company. With the slow rate of production, some updates were initiated by one company in one production series and by another company in another production series. Some series had substantial differences, while others only featured small changes to speed up production or to try to keep the aircraft up to date with the most modern Allied fighters. The companies that produced them were Aeronautica Macchi, which produced 395 planes plus the 2 prototypes, the Società Italiana Ernesto Breda per Costruzione Meccaniche, which produced 556 planes, and the Società Aeronautica Italiana Ambrosini, which produced a total of 200 planes. In late 1939, it was proposed by FIAT that they should produce the MC200 in their factories in Turin. Needless to say, FIAT refused, criticizing Macchi as too complex to produce. In 1939, 62 Macchi 200s were produced, 10 between May and July, 26 between August and October, and 26 between November and December. An interesting fact is that these aircraft were produced, but not tested or delivered to the Regia Aeronautica. In fact, as in many other cases with the Italian War Ministry of that period, small components were missing that forced the aircraft to be kept in depots for weeks. There were also problems with a lack of test pilots, or even worse, a lack of Air Force pilots, to deliver the new aircraft. Conclusions. The Macchi MC200 was one of the most produced fighters in Italy during the Second World War. It proved to be a reliable fighter, easy to produce and fly, with adequate power and speed, and served on all fronts where the Regia Aeronautica were employed. As the war progressed, it became increasingly obsolete against newer, more powerful types, but it still saw service until after the war, and even for a little bit period afterwards. That's it for the story of the MC200 Saetta. I was your host Butane, this was Plain Encyclopedia, and remember, keep us in your sights.